At a quiet family dinner in Franklin, everything snapped. One moment, I was passing the mashed potatoes. The next, my parents looked straight at me and said, "Nobody needs your money or you." The room didn't breathe. My sister nodded, almost relieved to finally say it out loud. I felt the air collapse around me like the whole table had already rehearsed this moment without me. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I stayed silent. Because while they thought they were cutting me out, they had no idea what that silence really meant, or what I was about to do next. And trust me, none of them saw it coming. I used to believe that distance was the only thing standing between me and a normal family. Living in San Francisco, working long hours as a software engineer, I told myself I was just too busy, too far away, too caught up in deadlines to be present the way they wanted. But the truth sat deeper than that, buried under years of unspoken expectations and the kind of history families pretend to forget. Growing up in Franklin, life never felt easy. Our small house always smelled like motor oil from Dad's work clothes and fabric softener from Mom's quilts. Money was tight enough that even the walls seemed to hold their breath. I remember the nights when the recession hit hardest, Mom whispering about overdue bills, Dad pacing the hallway, and me pretending to sleep while I listened through the thin drywall. Back then, I thought if I worked hard enough, I could pull us out of that darkness somehow. Madison, my younger sister, used to crawl into my bed whenever the shouting got loud. She'd clutch my arm and ask, "We're not going to lose the house, right?" I'd tell her no, even when I wasn't sure myself. I was 12, she was 10, and I somehow decided it was my job to carry her fears along with my own. That promise stuck to me like a second skin. School became my escape. I studied under a flashlight so I wouldn't wake her up. Teachers pushed me toward computers, saying I had a mind built for solving chaos. By high school, I was winning coding competitions and dreaming of a life bigger than Franklin one without the weight of past due notices or cold dinners eaten in silence. When I earned a scholarship and left for the city, I carried more than luggage. I carried guilt and a sense that I was leaving Madison behind in the very storm I'd promised to shield her from, but I didn't disappear. Every paycheck I earned felt like a new chance to fix something back home, the cracked pipes, the leaking roof, the repairs Dad couldn't afford. I sent money quietly without ceremony because that was how love operated in our family, unseen, unspoken, expected. Madison had dreams too. A small boutique, a place to sell her designs, something she'd talked about since she was a kid. Helping her felt like fulfilling that childhood promise in a way words never could. A loan here, a payment there, and eventually an SUV to help her run the business. Somewhere along the way, though, Madison's gratitude faded into something sharper. She'd joke about my big city life or call my help charity. Dad bristled whenever I made an offer to fix something. Mom shifted her tone whenever I mentioned visiting, as if my presence was an inconvenience, not help. Still, I hoped that family dinner would be different, a chance to reset, a chance to feel like I still belonged. But I misread everything, every silence, every shrug, every tight smile, and by the time I realized the truth, the damage had already been waiting for me at that dinner table. The moment I walked into my parents' dining room that night, something felt off. Not loud, not obvious, just a heaviness like the air had already decided what was going to happen before I even took my seat. Mom barely looked up when I came in. Dad gave a stiff nod. Madison flashed a smile that didn't reach her eyes, the same practiced one she used when she wanted to hide irritation behind politeness. I tried to ignore it. I asked about work, about the boutique, about how they'd been holding up. Each answer was short-clipped like they were checking off boxes in a script they didn't want to perform. At one point, Madison made a comment about my hair, so corporate with that sly little tone that made it sound like a compliment but felt like a slap. Dad muttered something about me being busy in the city, and Mom sighed dramatically when I offered to help with a few repairs around the house. It wasn't new. These little stings had been simmering for years, but tonight they were sharper, more deliberate, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd been rehearsing something without me. Dinner was served, and for a few minutes, everyone pretended to be normal. Forks scraped plates. Glasses clinked. Madison talked about her store being community-supported. Her words pointed as if rewriting history right in front of me. I almost corrected her but swallowed it. I'd told myself I came to reconnect, not to argue. Then it happened. Dad set down his fork. The sound was too loud in the quiet room. He looked straight at me, expression hard, almost resentful. "We don't need your money, Kimberly. Mom didn't miss a beat. Or you." She added the words, sliding out, smooth practiced. For a second, I just blinked. I thought I misheard. My ears rang. My chest tightened. The room tilted ever so slightly. But then Madison leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and said it. "She's right. Nobody needs your money or you." It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't hesitation. It was agreement. Cold. Final. Like she'd been waiting for someone else to say it first. I looked around the table, searching for any flicker of doubt, any sign that someone might speak up for me. But every pair of eyes avoided mine. That was the moment everything snapped, not because they rejected me, but because I finally understood they'd already decided I didn't belong, and they'd decided it long before I ever sat down at that table. I didn't remember standing up from the table. One moment Madison's words were echoing in my head, and the next I was outside on the porch, breathing in the cold Tennessee night as if it could wash the sting off my skin. The air tasted like winter, sharp, metallic nothing, like the warmth I used to imagine when I pictured home. I leaned against the railing, letting the silence settle. I stayed silent, not because I agreed with them, but because if I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure whether I would scream or break. I walked to my car without looking back. No one followed. Not Mom, not Dad, not Madison. For years, I had been their emergency fund, their fixer, their safety net. And now, in the moment I needed even an ounce of empathy, the entire table stayed seated like my absence made dinner easier. At the hotel, the room felt too clean, too quiet, like a blank page I didn't know how to fill. I sat on the edge of the bed, replaying their voices, their expressionless faces, the way Madison didn't even flinch when she echoed, "Nobody needs you." I pressed my palms against my eyes until stars burst. Then my phone buzzed. Elena Cook. She wasn't someone who called casually. She knew I didn't like surprises. I answered with a shaky breath. "Kim, did something happen tonight?" Her voice was cautious, almost bracing. I swallowed. "Why you need to check Madison's Instagram. Right now." My stomach tightened. I opened the app, searched my sister's page, and felt the last bit of hope drain out of me. There she was standing inside her boutique, smiling like her life was a fairy tale captioned, "Built this empire from nothing." Self-made and proud. Post after post said the same thing. No mention of the payments I'd sent home. No mention of the inventory loan. No mention of the SUV she drove that was still under my name. Just Madison the town's self-made star basking in praise that wasn't hers alone. "That's not even the worst part," Elena said. Her friend Erica commented that she never took a handout. People in Franklin believe every word. Something in me shifted. The anger I felt at dinner sharpened, crystallized into clarity. I wasn't just rejected. I was erased. I opened my laptop. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling, but not from hurt anymore. From certainty. If they didn't need my money, if they didn't need me, then I didn't need to keep holding everything together. I searched for the SUV's title first, then the loan papers for Madison's store. Payments, bills, transfers, years of quiet support staring back at me in cold, undeniable lines. And for the first time that night, I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. I just sat there breathing steady, realizing something they never expected. Silence wasn't surrender. It was the beginning of my pushback. I barely slept that night, not because I was crying, those tears had dried hours ago, but because my mind had shifted into a place I hadn't visited in years. A place of precision strategy clarity. The same part of me that once solved coding puzzles at midnight now examined every thread of my family's narrative and realized exactly where to pull. By sunrise, the sky outside my hotel window was washed in pale orange. Franklin was waking up coffee brewing trucks, starting people strolling into diners, but I felt strangely detached, as if I were observing someone else's town, someone else's life. I didn't bother going to my parents' house. I opened my laptop instead. Step 1. The SUV. The black SUV Madison loved flaunting posing next to it for her girl boss posts was still legally under my name. I had bought it outright, thinking it would help her deliver inventory, attend vendor markets, and build her boutique. I remember the look on her face when I handed her the keys. Gratitude, awe, the kind you can't fake. Funny how quickly that kind of gratitude erodes when pride takes over. I searched for the dealership's number and pressed call. "Hi, I need to initiate a repossession," I said steadily. "Yes, I'm the titled owner." The manager asked for paperwork. I emailed it within minutes. He hesitated. "Do you want to give notice?" "No," I replied. "Just retrieve it. Today." A strange calm washed over me. Not victory, not spite. Just release. While waiting for confirmation, I opened another tab. Step 2. The boutique loan. Thread and Willow. Madison's self-made empire only existed because years ago she'd called me sobbing, terrified she'd never achieve her dream without help. And I, in all my guilt-bound devotion, had co-signed a loan big enough to break her if anything ever went wrong. It was time to let it go wrong. I drafted an email to the bank. I will no longer be making payments on the shared loan. Please redirect all notices to the primary borrower. I hovered over send for less than a second. Click. Consequences weren't cruelty. They were clarity. Not even 30 minutes later, the dealership called back. "We've picked up the vehicle." Just like that. One piece of Madison's facade removed. I didn't smile. Not yet. I closed the laptop and breathed in the stillness of the hotel room. There was a lightness in my chest, unfamiliar, but welcome, like something heavy had finally cracked loose. A knock startled me. It was Elena. She stepped inside and locked the door behind her. "Kim, people are talking," she said quietly. "The SUV got taken from Madison's driveway, and the bank called her about missed payments." I raised an eyebrow. Already she's freaking out, posting cryptic stories, deleting comments. "Let her," I said. Elena sat beside me, studying my face. "Are you okay?" Truly, I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I'm done being her safety net," I said. "If that breaks her facade, she built it too thin." Elena let out a breath that sounded like relief. Good, but the day wasn't done. By late afternoon, chaos bloomed across Franklin like wildfire. A friend texted Elena screenshots from the town's community page. Did Madison lose her SUV? Thought she bought that herself. Heard her boutique might not make rent. Self-made, guess not. People who praised her yesterday were now dissecting her story, comparing timelines, realizing pieces didn't add up. The praise became suspicion. The suspicion became gossip. And gossip in a small town becomes reality. Then another text came, this time from Daniel, my cousin. "You might want to know. Madison's at the boutique crying. Scott's yelling. People are watching." I didn't rush over. I didn't crave the spectacle. But I needed closure. So I went. Thread and Willow looked smaller than I remembered, like the paint had dulled overnight. I stepped inside without making a sound. Madison and Scott were mid-argument, voices low but heated. "You told everyone you built this alone," Scott snapped. "Why didn't you tell me about the loan? About the SUV? About any of it?" Madison's mascara streaked her cheeks. I didn't think she'd actually take them back." Scott shook his head, disgust thick in his voice. "You lied. To everyone." Then he noticed me. His face fell. Madison turned. Her expression collapsed from rage into panic. "You did this," she hissed, pointing at me like a child caught stealing. "You ruined my life." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step back. I just met her eyes, steady and unflinching. I didn't ruin anything I said. I just stopped holding everything together. She blinked rapidly, tears spilling. "You're jealous," she spat weakly. "You always hated that people loved my boutique." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the lie was so small compared to the truth. "Madison," I said softly, "I loved you enough to give you everything you asked for. You loved me enough to erase every trace of it. Silence. Heavy, thick silence. Scott looked between us, realization dawning. "You used her," he whispered to Madison. "All these years?" Madison broke. She slid to the floor, crying into her palms. "Why couldn't you just keep helping? Why did you take everything away?" I kneeled, not to comfort her, but to speak where she couldn't pretend not to hear. "Because you told me. Nobody needed me." I held her gaze. "And I finally believed you." Scott stepped aside. He didn't defend her. He didn't blame me. He just watched as I stood up, brushed off my coat, and headed for the door. Before leaving, I said the only truth Madison had earned. Actions have consequences, even the silent ones. Outside, the cold air hit my face. This time, it didn't sting. It freed me. I walked back to my car, each step lighter, each breath deeper. The sun was setting over Franklin warm gold, sliding across rooftops beauty the town didn't deserve, but I finally did. Behind me, Thread and Willow's lights flickered. Ahead of me, the road stretched wide and open, and for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anyone but myself. Leaving the boutique that day felt like stepping out of someone else's storm. For years, I had carried the weight of their expectations, their silence, their entitlement, believing that if I just worked harder, paid more bills, sent more support, somehow the love would balance out. But as I drove back to my hotel, something inside me settled in a way I hadn't felt since childhood. A quiet truth: I didn't owe anyone the pieces of myself they kept taking. Franklin reacted exactly the way small towns always do. The gossip spread, twisting through coffee shops and parking lots. People who once praised Madison's self-made success now whispered about the loan, the SUV, the collapse of her boutique. Scott moved out temporarily, needing space to understand what was real and what had been built on lies. My parents left 2 voicemails, angry, frantic, but I didn't return the calls. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. When I finally boarded my flight back to San Francisco, or didn't look back, the city lights welcomed me home in a way Franklin never had. My apartment felt different, lighter, like the air had been reset. I brewed tea, opened the windows, and let myself breathe. Not as a provider, not as a fixer, just as a woman reclaiming her own life. I realized then that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors, and I finally closed the ones that were draining me. Back in San Francisco, I learned to live without the constant pull of guilt. I focused on work, on the friendships that chose me, and on building a life that wasn't measured by how much I could give. I didn't need revenge to feel whole, just distance, clarity, and the reminder that I'm allowed to choose myself. And if you've ever been the one quietly holding a family together while they pretended not to notice, I hope my story tells you this. Your worth isn't determined by who fails to see it. Tell me where you're watching from, subscribe for more stories like this, and don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss what comes next.